Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Last week, Democrats ran across the country on the message of improving affordability. Those people spreading the message were often young, 30-somethings. That was true in New York, where Zohran Mamdani won, and it was true in Detroit, where Mary Sheffield won. And the voters who brought those people to victory, particularly in the New York mayoral race and the Virginia governor's race, were young voters. The people running on improving affordability were often progressives. Amanda Littman, the co-founder and president of Run for Something, recently told a reporter that of the over 200 lefty candidates affiliated with her organization, nearly every one who achieved victory did it by discussing affordability, particularly housing costs. So how much does the issue of affordability translate to more liberal and more conservative places across the country? And how much can we understand about what young people want from what we saw last week? To discuss that now, we have Amanda Littman with us here. Amanda, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
So affordability, as I mentioned, was the winning ticket for candidates last week. In New York, Zohran Mamdani ran on the issue of housing affordability and freezing the rent. In New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill won the governor's race by discussing rising energy costs. In Virginia, Abigail Spanberger ran on affordability. Of the over 200 candidates with Run for Something, affordability was also the thing people ran on. Here in Detroit, Mayor-elect Mary Sheffield ran on housing costs being too high and focused on improving life for young people. Amanda, you've been leading Run for Something since 2017. I'm wondering, has the focus on affordability become more mainstream than it's ever been?
You know, the thing that I love about the candidates we work with is they have always talked about the issues that directly affect people's lives. So while affordability maybe wasn't the buzzword back in 2017, that is what we had candidates talking about. Cost of housing, cost of childcare, how you get around your community. It's about what it actually feels like to, live and exist in the United States these days. They were always hyper-focused on concrete quality of life and cost of living issues. I will say the last couple of years, housing has been far and away the biggest issue people have named, both when they're expressing interest to run and then often when they're actually on the ballot.
So this is indeed reflective of a deepening housing crisis that people across the country are feeling. I'm wondering how that issue and also other issues of affordability, whether it's energy costs or auto insurance rates, how you're seeing that carry across more conservative parts of the country.
Run for Something had candidates win, yes, and far left folks winning for city council in Atlanta, but we also had Andrew Harbaugh, a former Republican who left the party after January 6th, a parent of 2 kids, one of whom has special needs, a local journalist, run and win in rural Pennsylvania in a county that Trump won 70-30. Wow. When you're talking about cost of living, that can supersede a whole bunch of partisan perspectives, especially when the messenger is someone who is of that community, who understands the problems that those people face and how to talk about the things they care about through the lens in which they can understand it.
Yes, I could see how someone who community members feel is one of them, that this message is going to resonate more. Of course, there were candidates affiliated with Run for Something who lost. I'm wondering, what do you think the issues were that they ran into? What were the problems there?
For a lot of our folks who lose, they were first-time candidates who they're just new to this. They're trying to build their name ID. They're getting better at it. Run for Something doesn't expect most of our candidates to win. It's always a really pleasant surprise when we do. I often try to remind myself, if we had higher than, even like a 60% win rate, which this year our win rate was about 66%, that would mean we weren't taking big enough swings. I want to be working in hard races, in long shot districts, and trying to build power year over year, trying to, in some places, lose by less a little bit each time till eventually we can win. You're not going to take a place that's 70-30 to 50-50 overnight. You're going to take it by going 70-30, 65-35, 60-40, and so on and so forth. So losing is never the end of someone's civic engagement. Most of the folks we work with who lose tell us they're going to run again. Just another part of the process.
Amanda, I want to go back to that rural county that was 70-30 in favor of Trump, and you said that was in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's the kind of place that most Democrats don't engage in. Most people on the left don't engage in because it feels like an impossible place to win. But similarly, down in Texas, in a state Senate seat, a district that Trump won by 17 points, we had a local, Taylor Ramett, a local union leader, a Marine veteran, who was up against two billionaire-backed Republicans in a three-way race. He came in first with 48% of the vote. He pushed it to a runoff when he was outspent by some of his opponents 10-1. That's the kind of race where very few national organizations engage in, but Run for Something does, and we can see how that pays off big time.
Okay, so whether we're talking about this area in Texas or Pennsylvania, I'm wondering, how does the messaging or the approach change depending on whether a candidate is in a redder district versus a blue one, a district that went, again, 70-30 for Trump, let's say?
Yeah, so Run for Something doesn't try to dictate people's messaging. What we try to do is help candidates know how to tell their own story and know how to reflect what they're hearing from voters. The way you're going to talk about cost of living or healthcare or gun safety or anything else in a rural Pennsylvania or Texas district is going to be a little different than the way you talk about it in Atlanta or New York or Detroit. But what we try and be is really tight on values and flexible on policy. And most importantly, centered on community. These candidates know their neighbors and know their voters better than we do. Our goal is to help them communicate that the most effectively and efficiently and for the most cost-effective ways. But we don't try and tell people what to say, because if we were, they couldn't be authentic communicators. And that, as we've learned, is the most important thing that voters are looking for. Someone who really believes what they're selling.
Amanda, I'm a voter listening to one of these candidates who, as you described, is tight on values and flexible on policy. What am I hearing then? What does that sound like?
Well, it depends where you are and the candidate you're talking to, but you're going to hear folks maybe in New York talk about cost of living around rent stabilization and building more multi-unit houses near subways, and in rural Texas it might be about preventing evictions and thinking about rural housing. In Pennsylvania it might be about childcare. It might be about how you can't afford to live where you want to live because your childcare workers can't afford to live there, and so there's no way to get your kids cared for. I think it's important that we're really expansive about what it means to be a Democrat right now, because to be the big tent party we need to be in order to win in as many places as we need to win, we've got to see beyond our own specific ideological lens and really connect it back to voters.
And I realize that you're very focused on local races, which are so crucial. But I do want to zoom out and think about Democrats on the national level for a moment, because they weren't honest about affordability problems in 2024 before former President Biden stepped down from his reelection efforts. And Republicans leveraged affordability and won on the national level. Amanda, are Democrats learning the lesson that affordability issues are vital to run on?
I think so, and I hope so. Now, I will say it's going to be really hard for congressional candidates in 2026 because there's not a ton they can credibly promise and then be able to deliver to affect cost of living as long as Trump is still president. That being said, state candidates, local candidates, gubernatorial candidates can really make it specific and make it personal. And it's why I hope in 2026 we will give those folks as big of a megaphone as we can, because they'll be able to actually deliver on the things they promise.
Now, some commentators are saying that the victories, the Democratic ones in New York and Virginia and New Jersey, aren't that big of a deal because those places are already blue. And so maybe running on affordability issues can only take a candidate so far. What do you make of that?
They can try it their way in a swing district. I think we have seen that these candidates who really talk about the things voters care about, how easy or hard it is to live where you want to live and to get your kids cared for and to be able to get to your jobs, to find a job at all, that sort of supersedes partisanship. Swing voters care about the same things Democratic primary voters care about, which is, can I afford to live here and make a living and feel like I can make ends meet? If they don't think that's the right case, I'd love to hear what else they would like to argue about. But to me, it feels pretty obvious that this is what voters want to hear because they can see how it affects their quality of life.
A lot of people running on these affordability issues are young, and you work with a lot of young people. So I do want to turn our attention to that specifically right now. Why is it important that more young people run for office?
Because young people are wildly left out of the rooms where decisions are being made. And we desperately need generational change in power. I would say this is true in both parties, but especially in the Democratic Party. Our gerontocracy, a government for and by old people, has directly affected how people feel about government. Young people are seeing a government that is focused predominantly on the issues that affect older folks and seeing that their issues are not being put on the table. On everything from cost of higher education to, again, cost of childcare, cost of housing. We just saw some new stats in the last week. The age of first-time homebuyers has gone up dramatically. The first-time homebuyers are now 40 years old. So if you're a 20 or 30-something, the idea of the American dream where you can own your own home and then build wealth feels more out of reach than ever. Young people can speak to that. Young candidates can speak to that really personally and directly. They can also show up with an understanding that the way we did things yesterday does not have to be the way we do things tomorrow. And in fact, the way we did things yesterday wasn't working for most folks. So we have to do them differently tomorrow. It's one of the themes of Run for Something. It's also the thing I talk about a bunch in my book, When We're in Charge, which is about a new generation of leaders and how we can show up and do it differently, both in politics and outside of it.
So in other words, when younger people are participating in politics, when they're participating in the civic process, they're also more likely to become more robust participants in society more broadly.
That's exactly right. And we've seen this. Zohran Mamdani turned out voters under the age of 35 in record numbers. When you speak to the issues young people care about in a way that translates to them and on the platforms and in the styles in which they're used to receiving information, you can engage them. Young people don't want to be disengaged. They just want to hear solutions to the problems that we know, and I consider myself youngish here, that we know feel so suffocating.
Right. They want to be a part of the conversation here and feel that there are some tools to fixing some of these seemingly intractable problems. I want to stay on the topic of Zohran Mamdani because some experts recently told ABC that his win could be a turning point for younger millennials and Gen Z candidates. Do you anticipate more young people turning to your organization for help to run for office because of his win?
We've seen that in action. Back in
Already.
June, when he won the primary, we had more than 10,000 people raise their hands to say they want to run for office in the 2 weeks since, in about the week since the election day just last week, we've had another 5,000 people join the pipeline. Run for Something's candidate pipeline is now at nearly 250,000 young people who've ever raised their hands since 2017 to run for office. This is huge. It's the largest list of people thinking about running for office anywhere in politics, that many of them have signed up since Zohran won, and they are pointing to his victory as a proof that we can take on the establishment. We can do hard things. We can prove that better things are possible, I think is telling to where the future of the Democratic Party is going. And not all of them are DSA candidates. Not all of them are fully ideologically aligned, but they are all seeing that we don't have to settle for the status quo.
So you're seeing the potential for a much different looking Democratic Party. I mean, just 1 year ago, people were talking about how young folks had shifted to the right. So what does this tell you about young people's politics?
They are not beholden to any single party. They're not Republicans, but they're also not fully Democrats. What they are is looking for people who can get them excited. One of my mantras over the last couple of years has been people vote for people. We don't vote for ideologies. We don't even vote for issues. We don't vote for ads or door knocks. We vote for a person on the ballot who can tell a story that makes us feel like something is possible, that we can imagine a better future. That's why candidate recruitment is what Run for Something does, because when you get better people on the ballot, everything else becomes much easier.
In the last minute that we have here, I'm sensing some excitement, some growing excitement in your voice, Amanda.
Yeah.
I want you to just sort of characterize this moment for you as a political organizer who's focused on change and focused on how politics can improve people's lives. Describe this moment for me.
I am somehow more optimistic than ever. In the last year, we've had 75,000 people raise their hands to say they want to run for office. That's more than Run for Something saw in the entirety of Trump's first term. We are seeing people look around and refuse to settle for leadership that's not actually leading, refuse to settle for the status quo, refuse to be afraid or to be cowards. The leaders at the top or the leaders of today rather might be scared of Trump, but the leaders of tomorrow certainly are not. And I'm just so proud that Run for Something is here to help them. I am so excited to see them run and win. And I'm really, really cautiously, even nauseously optimistic that, yeah, the present feels pretty bleak, but the future could be so, so bright if we are able to help these folks win, to stay in power, and to transform our country, transform our businesses, transform our communities. There's so much good just around the corner.
Amanda Littman, co-founder and president of Run for Something. Amanda, thank you for joining me on the Metro.
Anytime.
It's the Metro on WDET. Coming up, Detroit has been receiving a lot more attention and investment over the last decade. What needs to be done to ensure that investment reaches people who never left? That's next on the Metro. Stay with us.